I'm typing this while receiving an infusion that has side effects similar to feeling drunk, which is a new experience for me. Turns out that it's very hard to type when there's an oximeter on your index finger. I'm skeptical that my thoughts will come out coherently, but at least they'll be sincere. I hate this. The lidocaine infusion I'm receiving today reminds me of ketamine injections, with the caveat that ketamine injections are infinitely more intense. If you're not familiar with ketamine, it's a drug used to treat depression and complex regional pain syndrome, and I was given a lot of it in the days leading up to amputation. The first time I went in for a consultation, I was told it would make me dizzy. I might see flashing colors, get nauseous, and feel disassociated from my body. This sounded unpleasant, but there were so few treatment options that I figured I had little choice. I went in. The people were very nice. They put on some music, got me comfortable in an armchair with pillows and a blanket. The needle was inserted into my arm. I sat there wondering what the side effects would be like. In a remarkably short time, the drug took effect, and I was ripped away from reality. Ironically, the drug inserted into my veins now is starting to impair my ability to the point that I will stop typing. I do not like this. Pray for me. Bye. That's where I left off this morning. It's nighttime now. I'm feeling yucky but coherent, so let's finish the story. 2 years ago, I was given ketamine for CRPS, which, in case you don't know, is the most painful of chronic pain diseases and has earned the nickname the suicide disease. I was expecting to feel a little loopy when I was given ketamine, kind of like when you're given morphine. Instead, I was sitting in the chair when I was abruptly ripped away from reality. It wasn't just that I was taken from reality, but that reality ceased to exist. I found myself in a bizarre state of being, with zero awareness of my body. If you've ever watched an iTunes visualizer from the 90s, that's the closest visual I can give you. And it's really not even close. Only, what if you were in the midst of it, riding the craziest roller coaster in existence? What if instead of 3 spatial dimensions, there were 4? And while you're flying through this swirling, disembodied ether-verse, without warning, this alternate reality would fold in upon itself, flip, and stretch. There's no air, but the space was filled with a substance that has texture and that can do bizarre things. Strange wah-wah sounds and colors and music follow wherever you go. Sorry if this makes no sense, but I'm trying to describe a state of being that is beyond description. I wasn't expecting any of this, nor had I knowingly consented to undergoing such an experience. In retrospect, I can see that the clinic tried to tell me what would happen, but their wording was so professional that I missed the point. I needed to bluntly hear the words psychedelic trip. They tried to tell me, but I misunderstood. Not expecting this experience, I was scared. I didn't have the ability to reason and figure out what was happening to me. My personal anchors that get me through hard times are rooted in reality, but now reality was gone. Correction, it didn't even exist. That's worse than simply being gone. My purpose was blown away like a candle in a hurricane. My determination to rise above challenges was gone because the challenges didn't exist, nor did my body. My family was erased from existence. My desire to help others and do some good in this world was null and void, because there was no world. No one else, just me, alone, free-falling through an ether world, with no hope of ever finding my way out. Only one anchor point remained. It felt like a thin thread attached to me and trailing off into the disorienting pandemonium swirling around me, connected to something somewhere beyond my ability to see. I remember praying desperately, "Help me, Father. I'm lost. I don't know where I am. I'm in a strange place. Please save me. Don't leave me. Sorry." I repeated that prayer over and over again as I hurtled through kaleidoscopic chaos, clinging desperately to that one thread, that one anchor I had left. Eventually, the drug began to wear off. The walls and ceiling reappeared gradually. The room was spinning about 100 miles an hour, but at least it existed again. I sat there, nauseous, dizzy, with the world whirling around me. Control over motor skills was pathetically non-existent. I had to flop my hand around several times before I got lucky and it landed on the call button. I pushed it. One of the nurses came. I remember asking, "Who slipped me the shrooms?" I have no recollection of the answer, but I do remember that they came in with another syringe, and it all began again. A few hours later, after 3 or 4 intramuscular injections, I was driven home. The world was still spinning too fast for my eyes to track. My body was beyond uncoordinated, and I was vomiting harder than I'd ever vomited in my life. Though not in the middle of a psychedelic trip anymore, I was still drugged up and loopy. At home, I crawled my way up the stairs and collapsed. My baby came over and I held him, still vomiting, still mumbling the same prayer over and over again until the blessed release of unconsciousness. The next day, I felt traumatized. Honestly, memories of that time still bother me, and I get stressed when I see, smell, or hear things that remind me of ketamine, which is why the lidocaine infusion is bothering me, even though it's not that similar in side effects. I've often wondered why it was such a hard experience for me when there are plenty of people who intentionally go out and get high and go on trips. People kept asking me whether it was fun, as though I was the lucky winner of a free ticket to La La Land. Not literally free, mind you, since insurance ended up not covering my treatment, but nonetheless a trip free from stigma, physical addiction, criminal charges, guilt, and the other downsides associated with illicit drug use. I'd been given a drug related to LSD, but under the wholesome label of medical necessity. Everyone's different, but for me, it was not fun. When the loopiness wore off, I immediately went to the various members of my medical team to inform them that I was not a fan of this new treatment and to ask if it truly was necessary, because I really didn't want to go back, ever. To my dismay, my doctors unanimously informed me that research shows that ketamine is one of the few treatments shown to help CRPS. Since the CRPS was above the cut line for my impending amputation, my doctors didn't dare amputate because there would still be CRPS in the remainder of my leg and could continue spreading. Either that or they'd have to amputate my knee as well to get above the CRPS. That's a big deal. Prior to getting CRPS, my doctors and I had already been gearing up for amputation for other reasons. CRPS was the cherry on top, and it was spreading aggressively up my leg. Since the disease is considered incurable, we were desperate to use any means necessary to push the CRPS below the cut line for amputation. For a month before amputation, I went in for ketamine injections 3 days a week, 4 injections per session with maxed out doses per injection. It was a massive amount of ketamine. On the off days, I was incredibly sick. Though I liked the staff at the ketamine clinic, each time I dreaded having to go back. It was a very dark time for me. So, did it work? Sort of. The area of my leg that had CRPS was pushed down, kind of like water draining in a sink, but it didn't go away entirely. However, it did go below the cut line for amputation. That's what we'd been praying for. We scheduled the amputation. I continued to receive ketamine, but in the final week or so before amputation, it seemed like my body was adapting because the CRPS began spreading upwards again. My friend One-Footed Phoenix had a similar experience, where the ketamine temporarily pushed down the CRPS, but then it started to rebound. Blessedly, my amputation was only a few days away. The doctors cut off my foot before the CRPS spread above the cut line. If you haven't experienced CRPS, it may be hard to imagine what a relief amputation was. You'll just have to take my word for it. Cutting off a limb was way less terrifying than living with such a devastating and incurable disease. November is CRPS Awareness Month. In America, complex regional pain syndrome affects 200,000 patients annually. I'm telling you this story today because the lidocaine infusion I received reminded me of past experiences, but also because all around you are people experiencing incredibly difficult things that you may have no concept of. Even though I had a couple friends with CRPS, I couldn't fully comprehend it until I experienced it myself. Nor is it possible for me to adequately convey what a ketamine trip is like. Even though I experienced it, it's difficult to wrap my mind around it when I'm not in that state of being. So when you see a random person on the street, you don't know what they're experiencing. Odds are you could pass by people today who are currently in the middle of the hardest challenge of their lives, and nobody knows or cares. This Thanksgiving, I'm grateful for many things, but I'm done with ketamine, that my leg was amputated, and that 1 year ago an incredible doctor saved me from CRPS when it got to my remaining foot. If you have CRPS and want to hear how my doctor saved me, I'll link that video here. I'm also deeply grateful for the experiences I've gained, especially the hard ones. Because of those experiences, I feel more aware that around me are people silently suffering, regardless of whether their challenges are similar to mine, easier or harder. Sympathy has morphed into empathy, compassion, and increased understanding. This holiday season, I challenge you to give others the benefit of the doubt, to remember that many people you interact with are going through deep struggles, and to resist the urge to judge others. And whatever you're going through yourself, hang in there. Save some compassion for yourself. Sometimes life feels disorienting and hopeless, but there is still that one thread that doesn't vanish when all others fade. Find your anchor and don't let go. I'm Stefanina. Thank you for joining me on my amputee adventures.